Good morning. Schedule change here at PowerMizzou. We are doing our weekly live show at 9 o'clock in the morning due to a specific request from Drew King to start his birthday with me on YouTube. So that is our present to Drew and our present to you guys. Want to remind you before we get going and talk about last night's win over Mississippi State and what it means for Missouri going forward. We want to remind you to get in touch, especially if you have, say, a 10-hour road trip coming up today. Get in touch with James Carlton State Farm. Make sure you have some insurance on that car. First of all, it's legally required. Second of all, it's legally required, so you should do it. CarltonInsurance.net, 314-961-4800. Get in touch with James. Ask him what he can do for you for your insurance needs. Also, if you do that, if you get a quote from James, if you tell him you heard about it on PowerMizzou, he's going to donate $20 to Every True Tiger Foundation, Mizzou's NIL collective. So even if he can't save you money, even if you choose to be a renegade and have no insurance, at least you can help out Mizzou's NIL causes by getting in touch with James. We ask you to do that. Again, Missouri, a 66-64 overtime winner last night. Drew, in a game that kind of seems like a season saver to me.
A little bit. It was definitely I'll say it was probably the most important win of the season, just because they avoided a 3-game losing streak, which they haven't had this year. And obviously, like, it had a lot of tournament implications too, not just the NCAA, but the SEC tournament too. And so I don't know that it necessarily saved their season, but it definitely made things a lot easier for the rest of the way.
Right. They could have gotten in the NCAA tournament with the loss last night. But they made it easier in that they now have 3 games left. They are against 3 of the 4 worst teams in the league. 2 are on the road. But look, you should at a bare minimum be able to split Georgia and LSU on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And last night's win allows you to just split those and I think get in. And truthfully, and a lot of people have been pointing this out on the message board in the last 24 hours. If you look at the bubble, I'm not even sure Missouri actually has to split them. Like, North Carolina is on the bubble and they're 0-9 in quad 1 games this year. Like,
yeah,
I think every year we kind of tend to forget that a lot of not very good teams actually make the NCAA tournament.
absolutely. Yeah. And, even though they're going on the road, you're looking at LSU and Georgia. Like, these are 2 of the bottom 4 teams in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
Like, splitting those 2 games should be a lot easier than splitting the Tennessee Auburn trip, right? So I think that the Mississippi State win gave them, it built up the cushion again for them going down the stretch of the regular season.
Yeah, and we do want to invite you guys, if you've got comments, questions, if you're starting your morning here with us, please feel free to put those in. We'll throw them up on the screen and get to them throughout the show. Also worth noting that Georgia has lost its last 2 games by a combined 81 points. I understand 39 or 49 to Alabama. One of those is Alabama. But they also lost by 32 at Arkansas last night.
Mm-hmm.
Missouri is, I think, comparable to Arkansas. At least that's what the season would say. So I'm not saying Missouri should go to Athens and win by 32, but quite frankly, Missouri should go to Athens and win. And the reason I think last night was so big was not just what we've talked about already, but they had that game won with 6 seconds left in regulation. They should have had it won with 20 seconds left in regulation. Kobe Brown went 1 of 2 from the free throw line. Demoy Hodge missed the front end of a 1-and-1. That's effectively 1 for 4 from the free throw line. Kobe then missed an open layup on the last play of regulation. To lose that game would have been damaging. To lose it after everything they had set up in the last 30 seconds, like, I think you could easily see that being a situation that would have carried over to Saturday.
Yeah, well, and to add to that, I know the analytics say that it was the right thing to do, but they kind of intentionally sent Tolu to the free throw line with Mississippi State's last possession, and Tolu made his free throws. So I think that was also a factor in it. But no, you're right. Like that was a game that you know, it it was a tight one down the stretch. They were in a couple of positions where they should have pulled away and did it until Nick Honor decided to hit, the shot of one of the shots of the season, I guess, that
Right.
DeAndre Golston didn't hit. But
Well,
yeah.
and it was a game that, like, the first half, I felt like, wait, Missouri should not be losing this game. And they were.
Mhm.
And then most of the second half, I felt like, wait, Missouri should be down by 15 points. And they aren't. And then the last minute of regulation, it felt like they were trying to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And then the last minute of overtime, they did the opposite. I mean, it was just wildly back and forth. But you mentioned the Gates comment about intentionally fouling Tolu Smith. So you can debate whether, I mean, he says analytics says it's the right move. I will believe him. He knows more about that than I do. I
Mhm.
understand the idea. Here's the issue I had with it. I don't think Missouri actually executed it correctly. Like, he said the idea was bear hug Tolu Smith, foul him when he gets the ball. The problem is they waited until he had the ball like 3 feet from the basket with really
Yeah.
good position. And Kobe didn't foul him until he was shooting. And that shot almost went in. Like,
Yeah.
I understand the strategy. I just don't think Missouri did what Dennis Gates said he wanted it to do.
Yeah. And you think about it too, like they waited for a while, like into the shot clock too. And if you're wanting
Right.
the last possession of the game, I'm trying to get
Do it
as
at
much
half
time
court.
as I can. Yeah. So that was definitely kind of an interesting execution of what Dennis
Yeah.
Gates wanted. Um,
And I believe him that that's what he wanted. Like, I don't think he's making that up. I just don't think Missouri carried out the plan
yeah.
to the way he maybe had it drawn up in his head. The other thing was, and we talked about this like as it was happening, when Tolu goes to the line and he makes the first one, which by the way, I'm still not sure how that went in. It hit the rim like 7 times and fell through. But once he made the first one, I said, I think it's actually better for Missouri if he makes this one, because despite the fact they had rebounded better, every person in that arena was kind of thinking in the back of their head, if he misses this, there is absolutely no guarantee that Missouri's getting this rebound. And that's where the strategy falls apart a little bit in my head. Is just, you've been so bad at defensive rebounding that this is the one team where, like, I'm always a proponent of foul up three with 5 seconds left. If I'm
Mhm.
Dennis Gates, I don't, because the other team actually has a pretty good chance to rebound and miss free throw.
Yeah, and I don't think Mississippi State necessarily got offensive rebounds off of free throws last night, but
Not last
um,
night, but it's happened all year.
it's definitely happened all year. And you're right that like Mizzou, their defensive rebound rate is like the second worst in the entire country. Um, so you are right to not have complete faith in them to get the board that would, seal Mississippi State's fate there. I actually wrote my stats that stood out piece this morning though, and I think that Mizzou's struggles on the board are mostly on the defensive end, because if you look at their offensive numbers, they're actually pretty close to average at getting their own misses. It's getting the other team's misses that seem to be the problem.
And nobody's going to say this out loud. I have to believe a big part of that is they are focused so much on getting out in transition that they're probably sending fewer capable rebounders to the glass
Mm.
than a lot of teams. And last night was different. Now, I think Tre Gomillion's return is a part of that. I think Mohamed Diarra's efforts on the glass is a part of that. I also feel
By the
like
way,
last night,
Modiara and Tre Gomillion, they have the top two offensive rebounding rates among guards and forwards on the team.
okay. So I feel like last night though there was a concerted strategic change somehow to make rebounding more important. And I wonder if that's what it'll be going forward. Because again, Missouri lost the rebounding battle last night, but it was competitive. They lost it by 3, not by 19. That's a huge difference.
Absolutely. Like, I think that was, it hasn't always been a huge factor in some of these games. Like sometimes Mizzou will lose the rebounding battle by 10 and still come out with the win. But I felt like that Texas A&M game, that was a real issue for them, was that Texas A&M had a lot of misses, but were mostly scoring off of their second chance points. And so I think this season has made me question the value of rebounding just because Mizzou's been able to overcome it a whole lot of times. But if they are able to improve, like it doesn't do anything but help you, right? Because you're at the bottom right now.
Yeah. Do you know offhand who the last place team in defensive rebounding is? Like who's worse at it than Missouri?
I can find out really quick. Hold up.
I was just curious. So,
I know it's a mid-major team, but it is. Gotta scroll to the bottom now. Hold on, I hit the wrong thing.
I'm hoping it's somebody that like Missouri can play in the tournament. Where
unfortunately, it is not. It is Morgan State, who is 13-14 on the season. So
gonna need Morgan State to go on a run in the MEAC tournament. Did I get that right? Or are they in the MEAC?
I think they are. They are in the MEAC. Congratulations, Gabe.
That's sadly impressive or impressively sad, depending on how you want to look at it. So one last point I want to make on this game before we get to kind of some of the questions and spinning it forward and all that. And again, if you guys have comments, questions, throw them up in the comment section, and we will get to those in the second part of the show. But the biggest thing to me last night was that this team now has tangible, visible proof it can win a game in which it does not shoot well, in which it's forced into half-court offense, in which it scores in the 50s/60s, because realistically, they should have won that game 59-57 in regulation, right? So that's not a thing this team has done this year. It's not a thing. I mean, they won the UCF game 68-66. Other than that, they are 0-8 when they haven't scored 70. I haven't looked at the shooting percentages. I would largely imagine in most of those wins, they have shot the 3 relatively well. They didn't shoot it well all night last night until they had to. But if you are going to go on any sort of a run in either the conference tournament or the NCAA tournament, if you are going to win multiple games in either of those events, you are most likely going to have to win once the way they won last night. And going in, showing you can do it, even if it's only one time, I think is so much bigger than having no idea if you can actually do it.
Absolutely. And I think Tre Gomillion was a huge part of that for them. I just kept thinking to myself, like, I really forgot what Tre can do for them, right? Because he just, like, he does not have a whole lot of stats. He obviously had 10 rebounds last night, but like nothing on his stat line usually, pops off. It makes you say like, wow, Tre had a really good night, but he impacts so many things for them and just brings like a different attitude for the team. And so when you see him out there, it really is like having a coach on the court, because you'll see him like really calm the guys down and get them organized. And there's a reason that Dennis trusts him that much, right? Dennis said last night he's going to have Tre on the staff after his playing career is over with. And so I think that Tre was really able to help guide them through one of these games where the shots weren't falling. And it was a real slugfest that they've had struggles with all year.
Yeah, and this is a good way to transition to the comments. We've got a couple about Gomillion. I wrote about him last night because despite the fact that Nick Honor hit the game-winning shot, I thought Tre Gomillion was the most important player in that game. And it was, I mean, I asked Honor about him last night, and he said he's the guy that does everything nobody else wants to do, right? And I think that's a really good way to describe him. This is a bad defensive team. He is a good defensive player. Like Demoy Hodge gets the attention because he gets a lot of steals. I don't think Demoy Hodge is a particularly good defensive player. I think he gets a lot of steals, but I don't think he's all that good. I think Tre Gomillion's a legitimately good, fundamentally sound defensive player that like you can put on the other team's point guard if you have to. If he gets caught in a switch against a guy like Tolu Smith, it's not automatic death, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he can defend somebody. He will get a rebound. There were a couple plays last night too where I noticed he gets the rebound and he kind of weaves in and out of traffic dribbling, and then he gets up court and it's 2-on-4 and he pulls it back. Like he just I don't know how to say it other than I think he's the smartest player on the team. Like he has the best basketball IQ.
Well, you mentioned like him getting switched onto Tolu Smith and being able to hold his own. I have a term for that. It's called he has that dog in him. Like that's what Tre brings to the table. Is just like he's not scared of anybody.
Yes.
I think that's the main thing, right? He's been through a lot. Right, he had to go through JUCO and Cleveland State to get to this point, and so I think he realizes kind of the stage that he's on now. And he was Horizon League Defensive Player of the Year the season before Demoy Hodge won the award. So I think he's always been that type of defender. It's just really cool to see it translate to this level, right? And it's been huge for Mizzou this season.
And I think he's the embodiment of this team in this. Nobody's told Tre Gomillion he's not supposed to be able to do this at this level.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody's told this team they weren't supposed to win 20 games. Maybe because if you look at the talent, they probably shouldn't. But here's the other thing I think that getting Tre back has allowed this team to do. So last night, look, Dre Golston just didn't have it. I mean, Dennis Gates said it. If you watch the game, you could see it. You don't have to understand a lot about basketball to know he's not playing well tonight. Sean East was like, I don't think he was bad. He was just largely invisible. He wasn't costing you anything, but he wasn't really giving you anything. So that Gomillion being back gave Dennis Gates another option that he hasn't had for the last 8 games, And now look, he could have put Gomillion out there, and last night Gomillion didn't play well and they could have lost. But the point is he at least finally had the option to do it, because this is a team, as much as we've talked about their depth and guys coming up, different guys every night. Ronnie DeGray ain't playing. Isaiah Mosley ain't playing. And Tre Gomillion hasn't been playing. And Aiden Shaw sometimes plays and sometimes doesn't. The truth is, this is a 7 to 8 man rotation right now. So every guy that you add to that maybe on one given night can help you it's big.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Aiden Shaw. They got some decent minutes out of Mabor Majak last night. That's another guy you can throw out there, matchup dependent, when the other team has a player that's kind of too big for Aiden Shaw to handle. Mabor Majak can just go and stand underneath the rim with his hands up, and that's all you need him to do, So yeah, I think that's always been a strength of the team, is the depth that it has and the different kind of combinations of lineups that Dennis can put out there depending on what the team needs at that moment. And Tre brings a different skill set kind of from everybody else on the team. And so it was really good to see him mainly look healthy. I think that was just the main difference was, we saw him in the Texas A&M game, but he only played 3 minutes. And so after not seeing him for 3 weeks, since that Alabama game, it was a good reminder of what Tre is able to bring for the team, because you realize like they actually really missed him while he was hurt. And so, I think that's a pretty good sign for the team that he's back.
And I think all this speaks to why Missouri fans should feel really good about this, and why I think this thing is sustainable under Dennis Gates. He has taken Tre Gomillion and made him a valuable player in the SEC. He has taken Demoy Hodge and made him, I think, a guy that's got a shot at second team all league. He has taken Kobe Brown and made him a far better and more complete player than he's ever been. He has at times called on Mabor Majak and, these guys that were like, I mean, we had written off Mohamed Diarra. We just assumed he was never going to play this year. And now he's starting and is really good. But the flip side of that is, I think the thing he does that a lot of coaches don't do is he's willing to do something like tell DeAndre Golston with 18 minutes left in that game, this ain't your night, man. Sit down. We're going to go somewhere else. And now that doesn't mean that you're not going to start next week or that you're not going to play a really big role at some point. And he has gotten all these guys somehow to buy into that and to seemingly handle it. And that's all big picture stuff that goes, I think, well beyond this year and why Missouri fans should be pretty optimistic about this dude.
I think Dennis kind of set the tone pretty early on in the season at the Wichita State game because, Kobe got into foul trouble, came back and did not play well. And Dennis Gates said, okay, you're going to be on the bench in overtime and we're going to run with the 5 that's working tonight. And credit to Kobe for accepting that, right? Because, I think if Kobe
a lot of guys wouldn't.
Yes, a lot of guys wouldn't. And I think the rest of the team sees, like, if Kobe's willing to do that, then who am I to be upset about it, right? And so, like DeAndre Golston is still going to be a really important piece of the team during this stretch run. And last night wasn't his night. And so, but I think Dennis has been very consistent about just using the guys who are getting the job done on the court every night. And so credit to him for figuring that out.
And like an underrated thing, I think, and look, I've always said more that winning makes chemistry more than chemistry makes winning. So if this team was 6 games under 500, they would not have good chemistry, right? But a thing that a lot of people, I think, will kind of roll their eyes at, but the first guy off the bench to hug Nick Honor last night was Tre Gomillion. In the background of one of the pictures was Aiden Shaw, who didn't play a minute with just a huge smile on his face, right? Like, yes, they all want to play. Aiden would love to play 30 minutes a game. Tre Gomillion would love to never come off the court. But to get the guys who maybe that night aren't playing to be as bought in as the guys who are is, I mean, that's coaching. That's coaching more than drawing up the inbounds play or than, if you believe Dennis Gates, yelling "shoot it" to Nick Honor when he crosses midcourt. I don't know if he did that or not, but it makes for a good story. So we'll get to kind of rounding out the questions and comments and stuff. Jason wants to know, how much weight collectively did the Mizzou fan base lose sweating out that game? I mean, it was like, I still don't actually think it's Mizzou's most unlikely win. They were down 4 points with 7 seconds to go in Knoxville. Like, that's not a game I think if you looked at like a win probability chart, that would still be significantly less.
I actually did look at the win probability chart. KenPom has it as the 15th most tense game of this season, out of any game this season.
And I think a big part of that is because neither team ever led by more than 6. I mean, Missouri's biggest lead in that game was 4 points. That entire game was played in a 10-point window.
Kind of boxing in a phone booth, right? Like, you can't pull away from the other guy. And so I feel like maybe that was the main difference between Tennessee. Like, they were up 17 in Knoxville and Tennessee came back. So collectively, I would say, I'm trying to think, there was like 12,000 people in the arena. Let's say everybody lost a pound of sweat. So that's about 6 tons.
The dancing kid on the Jumbotron lost at least 2 or 3 times that. Like, that kid was working, man. So we'll get to the next 2 questions. Really are what everybody wants to know here in order. So Ron wants to know, are they at lock status now for the tourney? I mean, assuming they beat Ole Miss and or LSU or Georgia, then yes. But like, they still have to actually. There is a world that exists in which they lose all 3 of these games. And in that case, I think they still would probably be left out.
You think they would be left out if they lost all 3?
I think they'd have a pretty good chance. Lose these 3 and then lose your first one in Nashville. Like, look, I don't think that's happening, but the chance of it is non-zero.
Yeah, I agree with that, I guess. I think at this point, it's like a 99% lock, though, when you look at who they're going up against, and just kind of the resume so far. Joe Lunardi, I'll bring it up again, said that they were a 90% lock after the Auburn loss, and so I think this win pretty much got them the rest of the way there.
Yeah, they are. they're like literally 5 steps from the finish line. All they
Yeah,
have to do is not pass out and collapse before they get there, right? But
yeah.
until they actually get there, you still got to leave open that 1%. Bradley wants to know what's a realistic seed in the tournament if they win the last. So let's say they win the last 3. That'll put them 23-8
Hmm.
overall, 11-7 in the league. 0 losses outside of quad 1, 4-8 I think in quad 1 games.
Yeah.
I don't know what like take the SEC tournament out of it, because I don't think the SEC tournament really matters unless Missouri would go do something like beat Tennessee and Alabama, or
Yeah.
Texas A&M and Alabama. So take that out of it. They go 3-0. What do you think is reasonable?
I think probably at the highest, like probably like one of the higher 7 seeds.
Mhm.
I think, if you can go on a huge run in the SEC tournament, you might move up to a 5 or a 6. But um, given just like what's left on the regular season slate, and winning those last 3 games, I think that would move on up to a 7 seed. I think that they're probably one of the 8 seeds right now, and
Yeah.
the last 3 games aren't really going to move the needle that much.
Yeah, I think they're probably on the 8-9 line right now. Now, here's the thing. This is not done in a vacuum. It depends on
Hmm.
what the other teams around them. I mean, if Michigan State loses 3 straight to end the season, Missouri maybe moves above them in the S curve, right? You also have to adjust for things like adjusting teams a seed line to avoid, like, if Missouri is an 8 seed and they're supposed to play Kansas in the second round, and the committee goes, well, we can't do that to Kansas and give them Missouri and Des Moines in round 2. So let's move Missouri to a 7 seed and this other team. Like, things like that do happen, and the committee says they happen. So, I think you've got to allow a 1 line margin for error. I think the ceiling's a 6.
Yeah,
Because and I think what again we have to account for, like Jerry Palm and all those guys told you last year, is we are trying to project what we think is important to a 12-person committee, and we don't
yeah,
know that. So it is possible those 12 people get in that room and deem Missouri a 6 seed. It is possible they deem them a 10 seed. I would be very surprised if it's any higher or lower than that, but I do think there's still that much variance depending, A, on what happens, and B, on just, I don't know, how those 12 people feel that weekend.
yeah. That's the main thing, is like when you see these projections, a lot of times it is solely like one person trying to do the job of 12, and it's an impossible task. And so,
Mhm.
but you are right, like Jerry Palm has pretty consistently been the highest on Missouri, and it's because like they don't have bad losses. And you mentioned earlier in the show,
They
like
do have good wins.
they do have good wins. They have good wins. North Carolina doesn't have any good wins,
Not one.
really, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how they stack up quad 2 through 4, but I would bet that they have like a quad 2 loss somewhere in there
Mhm.
too. Um, so yeah, I think Missouri comparatively, like resume wise, stacks up pretty well. The analytics are going to play a factor though, and that's kind of what's been holding them back in a lot of these projections, is that like they're 62 on Ken Palm. So yeah, I think that,
And without the ability to really move up, to be honest.
right, yeah. Um, Unless you want to blow these last 3 teams out by 40,
Right.
the needle's not moving up that much. So I think you're right that a 6 seed is probably the ceiling for them.
And I really do think Missouri fans won't appreciate this, but I think they will be a fascinating case study on Selection Sunday, because
Hmm.
it will tell us a lot about what this committee values. Now, that's only this committee. It's a different committee next year. So just because they valued this one thing this year doesn't mean they'll value it next year. But I do think it will be interesting based on where Missouri, and that's why I say they could be a 6, because that committee could go in and say, look, they've beaten other teams that are 4s and 3s and 2s in this tournament. Like, they're
Hmm.
a 60. So it'll be very interesting to see. Kind of
Well,
off topic. Go ahead.
and like the committee might say like, well, we kept Texas A&M out of it last year because we didn't really factor in the conference tournament as much. and got a really negative reaction about that. So they might swing it wildly the other direction this year and say like, oh, conference tournaments actually have a whole lot of weight this year, right? You really don't know until Selection Sunday.
My guess is the reason conference tournaments don't matter is because those dudes have been like in a room for 2 weeks and they're like, screw this, we're going to the hotel bar. I ain't trying to do this on Saturday at 10 p.m. So off topic here. Holy Schilt wants to know why Nate Oats hasn't been fired yet. I will only say this. I don't want to get into a Second Amendment discussion and all of that. If we fired college coaches for saying stupid things, we would have very few college coaches. Sometimes they say stupid things.
Yes, I agree. But I mean, I think Nate Oats did say some pretty stupid things.
Multiple stupid things.
Yes.
Like, think about this. The fact that he said out loud he consulted Ray Lewis on how to handle a murder investigation is not the stupidest thing he said in the last month.
Correct.
That's pretty incredible. But look, he's not going to get fired. I don't know. But I understand people whose reaction is, how is there zero discipline for this kid? I also think after rereading the story yesterday, there was some murkiness in that thing that, like, I'm not sure. Some parts of it were unclear to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think you're right when you say like, I don't know that it's necessarily a fireable offense, but I think there does need to be a lot more transparency about what happened, and so far that has not been brought to light yet.
Did you read his apology last night?
No, I didn't.
It sucked. I mean, it was basically, I'm sorry for I forget it was, but it was not a strong enough word. And he's like, it was not my intent to minimize the event. I'm like, but you did minimize. It was a terrible apology, like all of them are. He just shouldn't even have said that, to be quite honest. All right, moving back to Mizzou. Kyle wants to know any idea on the status of Ronnie DeGray. I mean, he is wearing a full-length knee brace. I think it is both of our opinions that Ronnie's done for the year, right?
Yeah, no,
we don't know that. Nobody's told us that.
Correct. Like we haven't gotten a Ronnie update in a while, and so that's kind of what makes me think that he's not gonna be back by the end of the season. Because like I've said, Dennis Gates would tell us like, oh, Tre's running in practice again, and we have not heard that about Ronnie at all. So I don't think it's a good sign for him.
Yeah. Sam wants to know if there are any thoughts on Demoy Hodge breaking the Mizzou single season steals record. Has he actually done that, or is it just something that could happen?
I think he said on the radio show this week that he was gunning for it. I don't know that he has hit it yet, or how close he's getting. But I do think it is a goal of Demoy's to do that this year.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he could get there. He is a boom or bust defensive player, man. I mean, he will get some steals and he will turn them into baskets. And when he doesn't get steals, he very frequently gives up points, so it's pretty interesting. Sam Thomas said someone said that Golston is dealing with an undisclosed injury. That's another one where some people said at halftime of the A&M game, it looked like maybe his shoulder was hurt. We don't know that. We had very limited time with Dennis Gates on Monday, so I didn't get a chance. We'll try to check that out later this week when we get him, but I don't know that, to be honest.
Yeah, and I asked the SID yesterday, is he available? He said yes, and Golston was out there warming up without any kind of sleeve or brace on his arm or shoulder or elbow. So I'm not sure exactly what happened because I didn't see it, but I don't know that it's holding him back.
It could be an are you hurt or are you injured situation, right? Ronnie DeGray is injured. Tre Gomillion may be hurt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kyle says Diarra surprises me with his handles a couple times every game. Like, he's pretty good for a big man handling the ball and shoot. Like, he drove from the corner yesterday early in the game, and not a lot of 6'11" guys can do that.
Yeah, I mean, he had a bounce pass to Demoy on a backdoor cut too. And so
Mhm.
when people call him a project player, like he does have a lot of flaws, right? He had 5 fouls in 17 minutes last night. That's something that he's got to work on, but you can see the outline of like what he could be, especially if he comes back next year, because like you can see the potential with him and what Mizzou could turn him into and how they want to use him.
Yeah. Okay. Danny wants to know, and this seems like a good place to wrap it up. And I just saw this question for the first time, and Drew hasn't seen it either. So this is very off the top of our head.
Mm.
Name some tourney teams that you think would be a fun matchup for Mizzou. So I always like to just kind of see teams that you're never going to see, and like I'd like to see him play against another like really up tempo offensive basketball team. St. Mary's is a really good offensive team that I
Hmm.
think they could maybe see in like a 7-10 game in the first round.
Yeah.
I think the most fun potential second round game would be Missouri Arizona, because if you look at the metrics, Arizona is probably the best offensive team in college basketball. Courtney Ramey's a point guard out there, St. Louis kid. I think that would be a game that would have the potential to be like 101-96 and maybe give Missouri a chance to exercise some Damon Stoudemire, Khalid Reeves ghosts from the 1994 NCAA tournament. But those were just two that kind of jump out to me right off the top of my head.
Yeah. I think if you want a win in the first round, I would try to look at
I would
Rutgers
try to go for
potentially.
Morgan State.
Yeah, Morgan State. But I think Rutgers, is probably a decent matchup for them. I would also like, if I'm Mizzou, I want Duke, right? Because Duke is not the same team that it has been in past years. I think that they don't have like that big thumping center that gives Mizzou problems, like a Tolu Smith. And how many times, how many opportunities are there to take on a vulnerable Duke team in the NCAA tournament
Fair.
and potentially pick up a win over them? So if I'm Mizzou, that's the team that I personally would want in the tournament.
Yeah, there's not a lot of downside to that, right? If you lose, people will go, "Well, it's Duke."
It's Duke, yeah.
But the flip side of that is I've seen Missouri actually played, I want to say it was 2000. They played North Carolina that was an 8 seed. It was an 8-9 game. Carolina was an 8 seed with Brendan Haywood when Bill Guthridge was the coach, and that Carolina team beat Missouri and then went to the Final Four. Like those blue bloods that get like an 8-9 seed, sometimes it's just a matter of they have all the talent in the world and they haven't put it together. And if they do put it together, you have no, like Duke has tons of talent. If
Yeah.
they put it together on that night, you really don't want to play them, right?
Well,
So,
and that is what happened with North Carolina last year. Like they were an 8 seed
right.
and went all the way to the championship game. So maybe you're right. They might not want Duke, but
I, I think the worst matchup is like and I haven't watched this year's Michigan State team play a lot, so I don't know,
yeah,
but like a team that is what Michigan State usually is, which is going to guard the hell out of you, be physical, and try to beat you 57-56. That's tough for Missouri in March. The one thing about the tournament that helps Missouri, they generally call a lot fewer fouls. They let
hmm,
teams play. So I think that's good for Missouri. Another team that popped into my head that might be fun is Iowa. They like to get up and down
yeah.
and shoot the ball. That'd be a fun first round matchup.
I'll point this out though, because I'm looking at bracketmatrix.com just to look at the teams that are kind of in that range. Let's see. Arkansas, Mizzou, Auburn, Texas A&M, and Kentucky are all teams projected on the 8-9 line right now. So,
Which is impossible because it would mean two of them would play each other, and that can't happen.
right, exactly. So,
Yeah.
the seating is going to be kind of interesting by the end of the year.
Well, we'll wrap it up. Kyle says Demoy Hodge is 5 steals away from the single season record. I think he
There we
gets
go.
it. He
Yeah.
definitely gets it if postseason counts, but I think he's got a good shot at it in the regular season. So, like I said, we're trying to get Drew on the road to Texas today. So we did it early. Appreciate you guys hanging out. A lot of activity here. So Who knows? Maybe 9 a.m. is the right time to do this, right? But appreciate you guys joining us. If you're watching live with us, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you are listening on the podcast, share it on social media, leave us a nice review, say good things, and wish Drew a happy birthday. Regardless of what you do, check out James Carlton State Farm at carltoninsurance.net. Give them a call, 314-961-4800. They got a lot of teen driver programs, auto insurance, home insurance, whatever you need. James Carlton is your go-to guy if you live in the state of Missouri or the state of Illinois. He's also going to donate $20 to Mizzou's NIL collective for every person who gets a quote from him and tells him that you guys heard about it here on PowerMizzou. So late night, not super late night last night, but a little bit of an early morning after game last night. But appreciate you guys fitting it into your schedule. Mizzou at Georgia on noon on Saturday. The only game the rest of the way we won't be at in person. Drew will have coverage of that one. Just we won't physically be in the arena, but we'll be at the rest of them. So headed down the stretch run. Appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll talk to you later.